Hello and welcome to another episode of the Paal15 Podcast, where we put forward the brightest minds from our strategic team to discuss the burning issues in the world of business technology. My name is Matt Gray, and today I'm joined by Jesse and Werner. Good to have you both back, guys. Are you both well?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matt. Thanks for having me once again.
Yeah, same here, Matt. Happy Friday. Look forward to talking to you.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. I think we're recording this one at the start of February 2024, and that means many MSPs and companies in the tech sector will have just gotten their plans for new propositions in motion. But as we all know, the best laid plans don't always proceed as envisioned. So guys, maybe you could take us through the most common things that affect the plans for a proposition launch. Werner, maybe you could kick us off.
Yeah, of course. Happy to do so. I think, like you said, right, beginning of the new year. So a lot of these sales kickoffs are happening. A lot of companies are presenting their plans for what are they going to sell this year. And I think what you see quite a lot is that people see that as a sort of a one-off thing, right? So there's fixed moments, and then look, this is our year plan for the coming sort of 12 months. And sometimes they split it up per quarter. So this is what we're going to focus on Q1. This is what we're going to focus on Q2. But I think especially today or now, what you see is that there are quite some cool things happening that are going to affect those plans, right? Mm-hmm. So there's quite a lot of new stuff coming out, right? I think if I sort of mention the AI word, then everybody knows where this is heading, right? With Copilot now being available for a lot of smaller service providers on CSP. There's some exciting stuff happening, and also if you look at the security space, there's quite some stuff happening with the NIS2 regulation in Europe, particularly, which is basically a GDPR on steroids, you can call it, and that heavily affects how service providers could go or should go to market, right? Because it's a massive opportunity to actually, become even more strategic and more important to your customers.
Yeah, exactly, and a lot of the things that we see happening across the year are different in nature a bit. So you have, like Werner said, these upcoming launches, but there's also sort of emerging stories or big trends happening in the market. A couple of years back, for instance, we saw, huge spikes in ransomware attacks, and it was in the news all the time, especially in the Netherlands. We saw a lot of, universities and schools and being affected by that. And then that was a huge spike, and you see that, then the market requires an answer. So, you see service providers scrambling to get an answer. Other trends like, the big AI trends, of course, last year, ChatGPT was the big shakeup, right? And then one of the most recent ones, like Werner already mentioned, was the Copilot launch for the smaller service providers. And it sort of came out of the blue, right? So it was sort of shaking up everything all at once. That had a big impact.
Absolutely. Like, what happened there with that Copilot launch? Werner, maybe you could take us through your analysis of that.
Yeah, like Jesse mentioned, right? So obviously everyone is a bit hyped for Copilot, and you see a lot of larger organizations already using it. You see a lot of reports from, let's say the advisories and all kinds of analysts and obviously Microsoft themselves on what are the benefits and how much productivity gains and how much efficiency gains are there. Then obviously it was clear that it was only available for enterprise on enterprise license, right? Or enterprise agreements, to be precise. Now everyone knew it was coming at a certain point, right? Available on CSP, and everyone was basically waiting for that moment to happen. But still, speaking to a lot of service providers, the moment was still quite unexpected, as in, oh, geez, now it's suddenly available. And the interesting part there is that you see that not a lot of service providers were actually ready for that, right? And what we mean with that is that, particularly if you look at the Copilot situation, it's not that when it's available, you can actually deploy it and everyone is going to be happy, right? There are some things that service providers could have done or maybe should have done before that launch, right? So make sure customers are actually ready for it, right? And then check, for example, what is the appetite and who are we going to launch it with first? So the funny thing is that there's quite a lot of dependency on the hyperscalers, but it's not always that service providers, deal with that in the best way possible, in our view, of course. And another sort of topic where you see that happening is, for example, the end of life or end of support situation, right? So whether it's Microsoft or whether it's SAP, or there are a lot of these end of life, end of support kind of scenarios where basically everyone knows that moment is coming. But that doesn't mean that you have to wait until that moment to actually start talking about that proposition, right? There's a lot of opportunity for service providers, whether it's again at end of life, end of support, or something around the launch, an opportunity for service providers to either be the first mover or to at least prep customers for, okay, but what is actually going to happen that moment in time? An end of life scenario, an end of support scenario, it's often, okay, update to a newer version or potentially migrate to a cloud version of that specific solution. And when it's a new launch, like again, Copilot, there's a lot of stuff to be done around governance, around security, to actually make sure customers are going to benefit from the solution in the best way possible. It's not that when you just deploy it when it's available, that the best sort of outcome is going to be the case, right, for customers. So a lot of stuff to take into account.
Yeah, I'm guessing acquisitions come into that as well, potentially. So I'm thinking maybe of the, BroadSoft acquiring VMware. There's surely some VMware partners are kind of going to be looking into what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially if you're a top partner, for example, for VMware, probably not a lot of things will change for you. But if you are, let's say not one of the most famous ones or top ones, I can imagine a lot of partners are a bit doubtful about, hey, what is actually going to happen, right? Am I going to be treated in a similar way? Or are things actually going to change for me? Am I going to get the same support? Am I going to get the same, potentially either, help when it comes to funding or resources to further develop my propositions? Or is, in this case, for example, a BroadSoft expecting that to be done all by myself? And still, whether we like it or not, I think still quite a lot of players in the IT industry are a bit too much vendor-led. Right? So they let vendors determine maybe too much whether they sort of see it or not, but what is actually my proposition, and forget to add their own magic to it, right? In the end, it's about, okay, what kind of services or IP are you going to add to a piece of technology in a lot of cases? And that's something to keep in mind.
Definitely. Okay, so there's a lot of things that can affect a kind of new proposition launch or your plans for how you roll out that proposition. But what should companies do? Jesse, I guess specifically MSPs, what should they be doing? And maybe even more importantly, what shouldn't they be doing?
Yeah, I think Werner already shared a couple of these observations, right? And I think what we see happening and what you probably don't want to do is what we saw happening with Copilot is everyone scrambling to get something out there, right? And they were sort of blindsided, like, oh, suddenly it's there and now I need to deliver something to the market. I don't have my story ready. Let's just get it out there as soon as possible and let's go. Whereas you could have thought it through before, right? You could have thought earlier a bit about it, like, okay, what are we going to do with this? So what happens is they go out there quickly, copy the hyperscaler story, basically that is given to them, and then go from there, and which is fine. But then they should keep in mind that it should not end there. I think you want to add your uniqueness, your differentiators to it, as well as round off the proposition itself in terms of what kind of services are you going to wrap around it, right? Especially with the Copilot situation, you cannot just turn it on, because then you get in all kinds of difficult situations with as a customer. In terms of data and security, etc. And what we also see is that a lot of there's not the mindset there yet that to take this into account and to look at what is upcoming in terms of regulations, launches for a year. So I think those are two key observations that we see, that they need to start taking it into account earlier, so you can work ahead a bit. And get ahead of the market as well, and be ready for it once it launches, or once it's available, or once it's relevant to the market. And I think Werner, you have a couple of key takeaways, I guess, that could really help there.
Yeah, I think when we talk about value propositions with our customers in general, right, whether it's a service provider or any other type of B2B tech company, A proposition is basically nothing more than clarifying what is it that you sell, to what kind of audience, and how do you do that uniquely well, right? So those three elements. So adding to the point you just made, Jesse, if we talk about what do you actually sell, and you want to make sure that you're not just picking up that piece of technology, put your logo on top of it, and then send it out, right? It should be about, okay, what am I going to do to consider this piece of technology as just a building block of a solution that I'm going to bring to market, right? So again, whether it's Copilot or whether it's any other type of technology, what are you going to put on top of it that makes it truly unique, right? The third element of proposition, because you want to sell something that is truly unique and stands out from the crowd. And then the second point, you also want to make sure it is targeted at a very specific persona in a very specific situation, right? So the more specific you can make it, the better the message will resonate also with the audience, right? So again, what are you selling to what kind of audience? And then audience-wise, what kind of benefits are you going to experience, or what kind of problems am I going to solve for you? Yeah, and then how do I do that uniquely well? So what is my methodology that I'm going to follow consistently every step of that customer journey, right? So what is the customer going to experience when I'm going to work with them? And yeah, I think those key takeaways. So how do you build a proposition is looking at those three elements very specifically, regardless of what technology or what kind of proposition you're going to put to market. It should be about thinking through, hey, what is unique about this? Who am I actually targeting? What am I solving for that audience, right? And still we see quite a lot of propositions that are sort of technology-led or product-led, right? So, hey, cool, I can build something, I can create something, and then from there on thinking about, okay, what problem am I actually going to solve, right? Can I actually sell this? Whilst it should be a customer-centric way, right? So think about an audience, think about a specific opportunity or challenge for that audience, and then think about, okay, how am I going to solve that in a unique way?
And Jesse, is there kind of a change of thinking that needs to happen maybe in terms of moving away from thinking of a proposition as a kind of a one-off thing that never changes and thinking more of it as a process that needs to constantly update?
Yeah, I guess so. I think, of course, there's companies out there that do this already, but it's an ongoing motion, right? You need to, it's not a one-off thing that you put to market. It's a constant update on the propositions that you have. And I think you also need to have a process in place as a business when sudden events pop up, right? So then I think you want to have a process in place as a business to make sure, hey, can we look at this? Can we, pivot the proposition maybe, or build a new proposition quickly? If you have that in place, I think you can, gain a more competitive advantage. You can also, start prepping your audience right before, sort of when this is coming. Oh, it's maybe in October or November. Well, you can already start prepping your audience now, right? About these things. And you might not have the answer yet completely ready, or your proposition ready. But you at least showcase to your audience already that you have something in the works and that you're thinking about this. And again, that could also keep your competitive advantage high, and avoid having your customers look elsewhere.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. So not only is it key to prepare your own business for what's kind of coming in the future, but preparing your audiences as well. Right. Interesting. Well, thank you, guys. I think that's about all we have time for today on this episode. Werner and Jesse, thank you so much for joining us again on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do like and subscribe on your platform of choice. And if you're interested in seeing how Paal15 is helping technology companies keep their own plans on track, then visit us at paal15.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.